The evening lights inside the Lincoln Ballroom shimmered off crystal glasses and polished marble floors. It was a private fundraiser, sleek, high profile, and filled with people who didn't normally clap for anyone outside their circle. Karoline Leavitt stood near the side of the stage, holding a sleek black acoustic guitar. She wasn't there as a speaker tonight. She wasn't even invited to perform. But when the scheduled musician canceled last minute, a quiet suggestion floated her way. Didn't Karoline play guitar in college? She hadn't touched one in months. But the moment they handed it to her, it all came back. Fingertips remembering frets, chords whispering their way back into her mind. She stepped onto the stage slowly, her heels soft against the wooden floor. The crowd barely looked up, just another guest, another face. Then someone whispered, "What's she doing?" Another said with a smirk, "This'll be good." Laughter bubbled at the edges of the room. Someone mimicked strumming in mockery. A champagne glass clinked louder than necessary. A few eyes rolled before the first note even left her fingers. Karoline saw it all, heard it all, and she didn't blink once. She sat on the stool, adjusted the strap, and looked down at her hands. The microphone crackled. "No speech," she said softly. "Just a song I used to play when the world felt louder than me." Silence returned, for a breath. Then she strummed the first chord. A single note, crisp, clear, and nothing like they expected. The first chord was low and haunting, a slow D minor, stretched out with deliberate tension. The ballroom's laughter didn't vanish all at once. It tapered off awkwardly, like a fire sputtering in wind. One by one, heads turned toward the stage. Karoline didn't look at them. Her eyes were on the strings. She played again, this time a transition so smooth it caught a few breaths mid-air. The melody was unfamiliar to some, but to anyone who'd ever loved old American blues, it was unmistakable. "Ain't No Sunshine," reimagined with raw emotion and quiet defiance. Her fingers moved like she hadn't skipped a day, picking and strumming in a rhythm that rose from somewhere deep, like the song wasn't just being played but released. By the second verse, the room had gone completely still. Phones weren't out. Conversations had died. Even the cynics who chuckled minutes earlier now sat frozen, their expressions unreadable. Her voice entered next, low, raspy, not perfect, but honest. She didn't belt. She didn't try to impress. She sang like the lyrics meant something. "Ain't no sunshine when she's gone, and this house just ain't no home." A woman in the front row leaned forward. A man in the corner blinked slowly, as if remembering something. Karoline let the chords speak between verses. She didn't rush. Every pause was intentional, every silence earned. Behind her, the event's organizer stood frozen with a champagne glass mid-air. He'd booked a jazz trio. He'd gotten a moment no one would forget. By the time she reached the final refrain, the room wasn't just quiet. It was listening. And in Washington, D.C., a place used to applause only when it's convenient, that silence was the rarest standing ovation of all. Karoline's final note echoed softly off the ballroom walls, then vanished, leaving behind a silence more powerful than applause. For a moment, no one moved. She didn't stand up right away, didn't smile, didn't look around for approval. She simply exhaled, like the song had taken something heavy with it as it left her. Then, a single clap. From the back of the room, slow, deliberate. Then another, and another. And suddenly, it was everywhere. Hands coming together with the kind of sincerity you couldn't fake. Not a polite clap. Not a political one. A genuine one. Karoline looked up. Some faces were stunned. others almost embarrassed, ashamed of what they'd expected from her only minutes before. She stood slowly, gave a small nod of thanks, and unstrapped the guitar. Someone near the front whispered, "That was, unbelievable." The event organizer stepped forward, adjusting his blazer awkwardly. "Karoline, that was unexpected." She gave him a half-smile. "That makes two of us." From across the room, one of the earlier hecklers, a young staffer from a think tank, approached her. "I didn't know you could do that," he said, clearly struggling between admiration and disbelief. Karoline shrugged gently. "You didn't ask." He chuckled, awkwardly rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, that's on me." As people returned to their conversations, something had shifted. Karoline wasn't just the spokesperson anymore. She wasn't just the conservative at the fundraiser. She was the woman who shut down a room without raising her voice. And that was a power they hadn't seen coming. Even after the music stopped, Karoline's performance lingered in the air, like the warmth of a fire long after its last flame. The conversations resumed, but they had changed. People spoke in softer tones. Some glanced her way, as if seeing her for the first time. Not as a political figure or a name on a cable news segment, but as a person who carried something real. A woman from the governor's office approached her near the refreshment table. "I don't say this often about people in your world," she said, "but that was the most human moment I've seen in this town in years." Karoline smiled. "Music tends to cut through the noise." The woman nodded. "Yeah, well, you just rewrote your resume in 3 minutes." Karoline didn't respond. Not because she didn't have a comeback, but because she didn't need one. Tonight hadn't been about strategy or optics. It had been about proving something to herself. She stepped outside for some air. The spring night was cool, the kind that carried the scent of wet pavement and faint jasmine. She sat on a stone bench under a lantern and took a deep breath. Her phone buzzed. An alert from X. Trending. Number sign, Karoline plays. Top post. They laughed. Then she played. Then they listened. Thousands of likes. Hundreds of retweets. A dozen video clips. All shaky. Captured from phones around the ballroom. Each showing the moment the crowd shifted from smirking to stunned. One comment stood out. "She didn't just play a song. She reminded us we're more than politics." Karoline stared at the screen for a moment, then locked it and looked up at the sky. The stars were faint behind city lights, but they were there. And tonight, so was she. Clear, unfiltered, and finally heard. By the next morning, the echoes of Karoline's performance hadn't faded. They had grown. Clips of her playing were already making rounds on social media, first among political circles, then, unexpectedly, among music lovers. One tweet read, "I came for the fundraiser drama, stayed for the soul in her chords. Who knew?" The video was shaky, taken from a phone in the back row, but it captured something rare, a moment of genuine vulnerability from someone the public had come to see as polished, calculated, untouchable. It wasn't just the music, it was the stillness she commanded, the raw, quiet confidence. Karoline sat in her modest apartment, coffee in hand, eyes locked on the screen as the notifications rolled in. It wasn't the attention that surprised her, it was the tone of it, the sincerity. Her inbox was full. Journalists reached out, not with scandal, but with curiosity. A producer from a popular podcast titled Authenticity Matters requested an interview. A performing arts high school in Maryland invited her to speak. But it wasn't the media buzz that stayed with her. It was a text from her father. "Saw the clip. You reminded me of your mom. she would have cried. That hit her harder than anything else. Karoline placed her phone on the table, walked to the corner where her guitar now stood upright, and knelt beside it. It had been a part of her once, before the press briefings, the talking points, the battle armor she wore every day in D.C. That performance hadn't been planned. It had been a reflex, muscle memory, emotional instinct. And somehow, it connected with more people than any speech she'd ever rehearsed. Later that evening, her aide Mark called, voice nearly breathless. "You've got to see this. A local music teacher in New Hampshire just uploaded a video saying she's using your performance in her class to teach emotional expression through music. She called it an example of grace under fire." Karoline laughed softly. Not because she didn't believe it, but because she never thought she'd be that example. She sat down at the edge of her couch, guitar across her lap, and began picking at the strings. Not to prepare for another performance, just to feel something honest again. Because what she realized that night wasn't that she could play. It was that her silence between the notes had finally been heard. A few days later, Karoline sat backstage at one of the largest morning news shows in the country. The studio was slick, polished, buzzing with quiet urgency. Cameramen gave cues, producers checked watches, and assistants with clipboards darted back and forth. But Karoline? She sat quietly, guitar case beside her, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching the chaos unfold like a visitor to someone else's dream. This wasn't her usual terrain. She was used to political interviews, tough questions, prepped answers, media strategy. She could handle combative hosts, partisan traps, carefully edited sound bites. But this was different. They weren't bringing her on to grill her. They were bringing her on because they were curious. The host, a respected woman in her 50s, known for her intellect and measured tone, greeted her in the makeup room. "You're not the first politician we've had on the show," she said, smiling, "but you might be the first who walked in with a guitar instead of a talking point." Karoline smiled back. "I didn't walk in with it that night either. It kind of found me." The segment was scheduled for 5 minutes, but the producers had already hinted they might stretch it. The public response had been bigger than expected. People weren't just watching her video, they were talking about it. And not just the music. The way she sat through the mockery. The way she never once raised her voice. The way she let her song say everything. When the lights came on and the interview began, Karoline felt strangely grounded. Not like a guest on live television, but like someone who had nothing left to prove. The host leaned forward. "You've worked in some of the most high-pressure political spaces in the country. Why did this moment, this song, connect with so many people?" Karoline thought for a second. "Because I didn't play it to impress," she said. "I played it because I needed to. And I think people are starving for something real. We've all become so careful, so controlled, that when someone just shows up without armor, it catches everyone off guard." The host nodded, visibly moved. "Was it difficult? Sitting there while people laughed before you even started?" Karoline didn't hesitate. "Not really. I've been underestimated before. But what they forgot is, you can't shame someone who isn't performing for you." A short pause. The audience behind the glass sat silently, many leaning in. Karoline continued, her tone even. "I didn't play that night to win anything. I just wanted to remind people that before politics, before party lines, we're all human. And sometimes a song does what 1,000 debates can't." The interview ended with a light round of applause from the in-studio crew. Off camera, the host placed a hand on Karoline's shoulder. "Whatever you did that night," she said quietly, "you've tapped into something bigger than a moment." Karoline walked out of the studio that day not feeling like a star, just a person who had, for the first time in a long time, been seen as more than her title. By the following week, Karoline's calendar had started to look different. Amid the usual press briefings, policy meetings, and party fundraisers, something new had appeared: invitations from people outside the political world. A nonprofit in Virginia wanted her to speak about resilience. A community college asked her to headline a student forum on leading with vulnerability. Even a few musicians, indie, grassroots, unknown to most Washington types, had reached out to collaborate or simply say, "Thank you." One message stood out. It was from a 17-year-old named Jamie, who wrote, "I play guitar too. I'm non-binary and scared to perform because people already look at me weird. But seeing how you sat there, calm while they judged you, then made them listen, that changed something in me." Karoline read that message 3 times. She didn't know Jamie, might never meet them. But that one line, "That changed something in me," mattered more than 10 cable news appearances combined. Because now, she understood something deeper. Her story had stopped being hers alone. She was no longer just the girl who surprised a fancy room with a guitar. She had become a symbol, intentional or not, for breaking molds, for doing the unexpected, for standing in the storm and not flinching. Later that evening, as the city dimmed and the air cooled, Karoline sat on her apartment balcony with her guitar across her lap again. She wasn't practicing. She wasn't performing. She was thinking. Thinking about how strange it was that a moment born out of improvisation, of simply not walking away, had reached so many corners of the country. And how the only reason it worked was because it hadn't been planned. She strummed a soft melody. Not a famous song. Not even a finished one. Just chords that rose and fell with her thoughts. Mark, her longtime aide, texted her mid-chord. "You just got invited to speak at the University Arts Conference in Austin. Panel on authenticity. I didn't even know that was a thing." Karoline laughed quietly. Authenticity, she thought. Not a party platform, not a buzzword, but maybe the one thing people are desperate to feel again. Because in a world flooded with noise, her quietest moment had spoken the loudest. 1 month after that unforgettable evening in the ballroom, Karoline found herself walking through the back entrance of a local performing arts center in New Hampshire, her hometown. She wasn't there to campaign. There were no reporters, no political aides, just rows of high school students waiting in folding chairs, eyes filled with curiosity, boredom, nervousness, some all at once. The school's music teacher had invited her, not as Karoline Leavitt, former White House press secretary, but as the woman who played a song when no one thought she could, and silenced a room without saying a single political word. She stepped up to the small wooden stage, guitar case in hand, dressed in jeans and a simple blue sweater. Her silver cross necklace hung around her neck like always, this time catching the gymnasium's fluorescent lights just enough to glint. There were no prepared remarks. She set the guitar down gently beside her and looked out at the students. "You don't know me," she said, "and that's okay. But I want to tell you something that took me a long time to learn. You don't have to shout to be heard." A few heads tilted, phones stayed down. "I used to think I had to fight every room I walked into," she continued. "Prove I belonged. That I was tough enough, loud enough, smart enough. But that night, when I picked up this guitar, I realized I didn't need to prove anything." She opened the case, pulled the guitar into her lap, and strummed a soft, slow intro. "I didn't come here to give a speech. I came to give you a moment. And with that, she played. No fanfare, no stage lighting, no clinking glasses, just the simple rhythm of someone being exactly who they are, in a space that didn't expect it, but desperately needed it. When the final note faded, the students didn't cheer. They didn't leap to their feet. They just sat, silent, still, processing what they'd just felt. And Carolina knew she had done it again. Not captured the moment, but created one. Afterward, a girl approached her quietly. "I didn't think someone like you could be like me," she said, "but now I want to start writing songs again." Caroline smiled. "That's the whole point." As she packed up her guitar and stepped into the crisp afternoon light, she thought about how strange and beautiful it all was, that in a world so determined to shout over itself, a single chord still had the power to change the atmosphere. And sometimes, the story people mock you for in the beginning becomes the song they never forget. They laughed when she picked up the guitar. They expected a mistake. They expected a moment to mock. But Caroline didn't play for their approval. She played for something deeper, for the girl she used to be, for the strength people forget, lives in quiet things. And as her music filled the room, so did something else. Respect, stillness, truth. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She let the strings speak for her. And that night, the room that mocked her listened. Because sometimes it's the sound they never saw coming that leaves the longest echo. Thanks for watching Surprising Stories. If this moment inspired you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And remember, your voice, your story, might just be the note that changes everything.